is time to talk music and cannabis. For that, I'd like to welcome two gentlemen to the stage. The first, Vice President of Content at High Times. He was recently recognized as Benzinga's 2022 Cannabis Lifestyle Journalist of the Year. Please welcome our moderator for the Fireside Chat, John Cappetta. Joining John on stage is founder of the hip-hop collective Save Money and Save Money, Save Life Foundation, whose mission is to use art and entertainment to foster sustainable change by funding programs in Chicago centered on health and the arts. He's also the founder of Chicago's first Black-owned cannabis brand, 93 Boyz, whose core mission is focused on reinvesting in the communities and individuals that have been historically and disproportionately affected by outdated laws, prejudices, and assumptions regarding cannabis consumption. Let's hear it for Chicago's own Vic Mensa.
Thank y'all for having me.
John, take it away.
Is this on? Or let's just use, does this work? Yep, okay, boom, boom. We're good. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. As he just mentioned, my name is John, and I'm sure most of you guys recognize this guy sitting next to me. Although just breaking into cannabis, as you can see, Vic's got a larger-than-life personality, reaching from the music industry to the fashion icon that he is. His reach extends far past his own projects, and one of the things that actually I respect most about Vic is his ability to wear his originality and not subscribe to the trends of the moment and make those of his fans feel comfortable in their own skin, which I think is something that we can all learn from. So, Vic, we actually have a nice feature coming out next month in High Times about your storied history, but why don't you tell us about your original hustle, as you called it?
Yeah, cannabis was what introduced me to being an entrepreneur, what introduced me to being punctual, all when I was 13, 14 years old. And, it's the first time I really studied packaging and presentation. And I was starting to do music at that same time. That's when I first started to write raps. But I sold eighths way before I sold raps. And through that pursuit, I actually funded all of my first music projects, all of my studio sessions, and purchasing the jewel cases that I put my mixtapes in, purchasing the printouts of the album artwork and the merchandise, posters. All that came from me selling weed, when I was 14, 15 years old. And in that way, I think that I really learned the ability to build community and the ability to kind of garner a fan base, because music was grassroots for us and the grass was grassroots. So I was selling Sawbucks and Dubs, that's 10s and 20s in Chicago lingo. I was selling those to the same people that the next year I would be selling my mixtape to. So it's like I already had a rapport with people to be like, okay, well, you could come to me, you could trust what I'm going to sell you. I'm gonna have a consistent product. I'm going to have a quality product. I'm gonna have customer service. And in many ways, those are the same things as I began to take my music seriously that I implemented into that process. And I stopped around the time music really began to take off for me, you know what I'm saying? And just really focused on music. But in the past, 6 or so years, stepped back into cannabis in the black market space. And as things began to turn in Illinois, as the legislation began to change and, sun began to break, I was like, just dedicated to get into the industry, by any means necessary.
So, you've obviously traveled all over the world with your music. with cannabis, you're focusing on Chicago right now. Is the goal to eventually be part of the MSO superstructure, or is Chicago, because I know how near and dear Chicago is to your heart, so is the focus on winning Chicago first, or are you planning on just going wide with it?
We're definitely focused on Chicago primarily at this point in time. I don't think that my goal is ever to be a piece of a superstructure. I don't know if that sounds like me, but to be in multiple states, 100%, you know what I'm saying? But right now, because Chicago is so new and there's so far to go in this market, we're really focusing on how do we bring a different angle of creativity to the industry in Chicago. You know what I mean? Obviously, the quality of Chicago is needing improvement as well, you know what I'm saying? So one thing I'm really thinking about is like, for me, I couldn't even imagine getting into the cannabis industry without putting intention and focus into reinvestment. You know what I'm saying? Because being a Black American, so many of the people near and dear to me and the community that I'm from has been decimated by the war on drugs as a whole, and cannabis being obviously a part of that, and the criminalization of cannabis having been weaponized against us, for the past century. And so right now with 93 Boyz, the way I'm really looking at it is, how do we, on one hand, create a cutting edge entity and at the same time make its ethos that we are reinvesting into the community and we're doing things that build the community that we're from. You know what I mean? Because it's not separated to me. I speak to people on a daily basis who are serving 5, 10, 15, 25 years in prison. And it might not be for weed, but it's hard to quantify, because even if you expunge all the weed records and you release people that are currently incarcerated for cannabis, you can't actually trace whose first arrest was for smoking weed. You know what I mean? I know so many people who first arrest was maybe for a blunt, or maybe for an eighth, or maybe for an ounce. And it wasn't that first arrest that has them currently in the system, but once you're inside of it, it's a vicious cycle. So you might be off that case and now you're on probation, and then you go down to South by Southwest to try to, which is a music festival, to try to push your music career, and your PO is violating you and you end up back locked up. So you ain't technically locked up for having some weed, but, for all intents and purposes, you are.
You're still locked up.
And that's the reality of our community right now, man. So what I'm working towards with 93 Boyz, and coming into it with, is that this has got to be bigger than us. It's got to be bigger than me, and we have to be building coalition and building community of Black brands in this space. Because it's a travesty that the history is what it is, and yet the cannabis industry in Chicago is like 0% Black at this point in time. You know what I mean? 0.2 or something. So
you actually touched on a few things there that I want to get more into the ethos of the brand, but while we're talking about the criminal justice reform, I know that you have a partnership with Books Before Bars. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing there and why that organization was important to you?
Yeah, so Books Before Bars is just the name of a program that I made up, actually. And so we're launching our brand with this program, where we've purchased a large number of different titles that have been inspirational to me and to friends of mine while they've been incarcerated, and we're sending them to different Illinois jails, prisons, and youth facilities. And, I'm passionate about it because I've been sending books into prisons for 10 years. And I've seen the magnanimous potential for transformation when you give somebody the right book at the right time. The first book that I sent somebody when they was locked up was my homie Ice Face. And I sent him Huey P. Newton's Revolutionary Suicide. And Huey P. Newton, Black Panther Party chairman, speaks in the book about how when he was locked up, he learned to master his memories so that he transported his mind out of the confined situation of his body. And when I gave that to Iceface, and when he came home, it was just like he just appreciated it so deeply because it gave him the tools to survive, you know, this deadly experience. And so in the past few years, I've just seen it change, brothers. Like, one of my guys got locked up about a year ago, and, you know, this is a dude who's had a hard life. Like, he was born in federal prison and been in and out since he was 11 and, you know, been in the streets. And, man, before he went in, it was like, I can't take you nowhere, man. I can only kick it with you in the studio, you know, because I'm like, I can't take you to the Chateau Marmont. You're going to be talking about shooting people and all type of shit. And
Chateau's a very specific type, too.
You know, I can't take you there, gang. It's like, and, you know, but then when he got locked up, I was reading this book called The Game of Life and How to Play It. And it's this little book of, like, spiritual law, it's similar to like Eckhart Tolle and different self-help books. And I gave it to him, and this was about a year ago. I gave it to him, and I just saw the way that he began to transform. And I was reading it at the same time too, and I really was transforming at the time. So it was just a snowball effect. It's like 1 book, 2 books, 3 books. Now the content of our conversations was like so drastically different from before, and we was only discussing positive things and discussing our power and like scripture and how we manifest the things we want in our lives. And you know, so when I was starting this brand, I was just thinking about, how do I push freedom? How do I scream freedom in this moment? You know, I don't think it would be responsible of me to come into this game and in this industry that has been responsible for stealing the freedom of so many if I was not finding a way to give freedom. Thank you. And so that's when I stumbled across the Books Before Bars concept, you know. I was talking to another brother in Dixon Prison who was the cellie of a friend of mine named Musa. I wish he could be here today, but in 2020, I was actually able to help him come home 12 years early on a 25-year sentence. And my life was changed by that, you know?
That's incredible.
My life was changed by that. And so much of my relationships with these guys has been through books. And so what we're doing right now is we're paying it forward, and we're sending a bunch of these books into the prisons.
I love that. It sounds awesome. I mean, using inspiration as a tool to motivate is incredibly powerful. So jumping back to what you're doing with 93 Boyz, is that really the ethos of the brand? Like trying to inspire people through cannabis? Because honestly, see, looking at the bag, and I got one of their Mylars right here somewhere. Bingo bango. Obviously, you got the gas touch, but you guys you were born in 93, so
yeah.
Why don't you tell me a little bit more about what 93 Boyz means?
Yeah, so me and all my guys, we were all born in 1993. And I was doing a clothing line a few years ago called 93 Punks. And just as we were looking for the entity to create, we came across 93 Boyz, and it just made sense to us. And a lot of us came up selling weed. Like that was our hustle, you know what I'm saying? And we were known in our different schools in Chicago as the weed men, you know? And as we grew up, some guys really stayed on that path. Some of us veered into music more. But as far as the ethos of the brand, I believe that it's twofold, you know what I mean? Because we're 100% approaching it like clothing, like streetwear, like fashion, you know, like art, and like hip hop, you know what I mean? So it's culture on one hand, and at the same time, it's community. It's culture and community. That's really the ethos of 93 Boyz, and I believe that it's pretty much the ethos of what I do in general. You know, it's like with music, I'm making music that is of a high level, that is, you know, well produced, that's like elite lyricism, but at the same time, it's conscious, you know what I mean? It's like you're learning things from the music. It's speaking about real life events. It's speaking about social issues, and it's honest. So as we're building this, that's our approach as well. And there are other brands, a lot of people in the fashion space that we are kind of looking to as inspiration, and brands like Pierre Moss that are on the cutting edge of high fashion and couture, but are also providing mental health services, you know what I mean? Or a brand called Daily Paper that is based out of Africa that is internationally bringing the African angle to high fashion, but they also build soccer fields for young girls in Accra, Ghana. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I haven't seen yet in cannabis. It's like those things exist in fashion to where you can be fresh, you can be doing well and doing good at the same time. And I haven't really seen that yet in cannabis. Not to say that it doesn't exist, but I personally don't know about it.
So that actually leads me into a great next question. I was going to ask how you plan to utilize your other talents, but to sell this brand. But considering what's worked in the space thus far, you look at a brand like Cookies and merchandising, right, and how that's really helped them transcend just their cannabis sales, but spread across borders. What do you guys have planned for 93 Boyz? I imagine that there's clothing and merchandise coming as well, but with everything we saw, let's say with the Bored Apes recently and the Snoop Dogg and Eminem mixtape, is there going to be a 93 Boyz mixtape someday?
You know we got to have a 93 Boyz mixtape. I swear we do. Music, fashion, team building, honestly, is something that I'm really focused on right now. One of my mentors, or my main mentor in the space, is Dan Pettigrew. And shout out to Al Harrington. Dan Pettigrew and Al Harrington founded Viola. And so they have the largest black cannabis brand. And I've just been so inspired by the way that they have been onboarding different team members. You know what I mean? Like they got John Monopoly, who was Kanye's first manager, and they just brought Allen Iverson in the mix. And you know what I mean? They're just like putting different people of different skill sets in the mix and building this coalition. So that's really what we're planning in Chicago right now.
Yeah. I love that. That sounds like teamwork makes the dream work, right?
You know what I mean?
Okay, so again, leaning into the high octane with the gas, is gas a personal flavor profile for you? Is that just what the market's responding to today?
I've always been an OG person, you know what I mean? So in Chicago, it's more about the Zaz right now, and I feel that we're coming with a mixture, you know what I'm saying?
You want a portfolio?
A portfolio is 100% what we're building right now, and we also have a smaller, more personal grow where we're testing things out, and my partner has really got his hands in the dirt and has come up with gold. And so although we're doing our legal thing, we're also doing something some personal where we really are just being ingrained in the process.
Let's call it R&D, research and development.
Research and development.
Traditional R&D.
Exactly. Exactly.
Love that. Okay, so you speak of the portfolio. Do you want to tell us about some of the strains and some of the cultivars that you're bringing to market? Are there stories behind them? Or are you just trying to satisfy the different, not trying to satisfy, but trying to hit the different terpene profiles that are out there?
Yeah, we've been working with a genetic that's 92 octane that we've kind of been putting some work on to create a 93 octane. Right now in the stores, there's a Gorilla Glue cross, a Do-Si-Do cross. We're doing a Jet Fuel OG, so that's really in our gas space. And when we first got into dispensaries, that was April, and it was all blends, pre-rolls. It's we kind of been racing against the clock, you know what I'm saying? And we're just starting to roll in the flower portfolio.
So to speak to that point, I know you have a partnership with Arise. How has that been for you? Are you bringing them genetics and saying, hey, this is the stuff we want? Or is it more like, you get to see a Willy Wonka's factory of weed and say, ooh, this one looks good to me?
It's kind of been both, you know what I mean? So we've been bringing our genetics from our R&D, and then we've also been like shopping for genetics and meeting with different geneticists, working with some genetics that they are already growing, and just really collaborating on every level of the process, like, down to like the branding and the brand identity. It's like I designed a lot of the shit on Photoshop, you know what I mean? And so every part of the process, you know what I mean? We're spending time in the dispensary, spending time with the bud tenders, you know what I mean? It's like I'm taking names, and just like really
building relationships.
Yeah, building relationships, because those people are so important, you know what I mean? Like, those people really are the lifeblood of this shit. Like, they move this shit, and they really respond and respect when you treat them with admiration and respect, and like appreciation for the important role that they play in this game. And so I'm looking at it grassroots, you know what I mean? Like, when I started doing music, as I was talking about, I was in the hallways in Whitney Young, I was in Kenwood, I was in Lane Tech, I was at Walter Payton, I was at all the different high schools, and I was selling my mixtapes, or if they wasn't buying mixtapes, I was giving mixtapes away and selling tickets, to my shows. And it's like that grassroots approach is the same one we're taking right now. Obviously, it's a different age, you know what I mean? We're 10 years later, but human beings are the same. And so that's the same way I'm approaching this. It's like I was in Whitney Young, now I'm in Mission Dispensary, you know what I mean? I was in Kenwood, now I'm in D33. And I'm just connecting with people, you know what I mean? Because I think that's the greatest strength of cannabis, is that it's a connector of people. Obviously, it's like strong medicine, but really it brings a lot of us together. How many of the most significant relationships in your life are based off of somebody that, you first really started kicking with and y'all was smoking together,
100%.
And so that's what we're doing is building relationships with people. And that's why we really focused on Chicago right now. It's like, obviously, we want to expand to different states, but we're keeping it home for now. So
I feel that, and actually, I think that I often joke that I made most of my friends in a smoking section, right? Whether it be outside of a bar, like, whatever, just in a circle, wherever. But I think that, like, there's one thing is that I've learned, at least from my time in the cannabis industry, is that there's so many different flavor or personal preferences that really dictate what makes a consumer want to stick with somebody, or whatever. So I would say, besides that the bud tenders are really the front line and are helping you mobilize these sales, what have you learned since 93 Boyz has launched that, like, maybe doesn't compare to the traditional market?
I think I've learned that there are so many barriers in cannabis. You know what I mean? Like, the entire process in Illinois has been so much smoke and mirrors, and the politics surrounding it has been just rife with corruption. You know what I mean? Like, this whole thing was presented as being this social equity program, and obviously we were all skeptical, but it was presented to us as being the model program that was going to create the template for New York and all these other states, and really be about empowering the community damaged by the war on drugs. And it's been a finesse. It's just been full of lies and gatekeeping, and it's been none of what it was really touted to be. And some of the right people, for sure, have gotten some licenses. Like, shout out to Edie Moore, shout out to some of the people that really put in work in this city and have been deservingly rewarded. But holistically, it's been a scam, And my community is still being excluded. I mean, the barriers and the limitations to even applying alone leave it leave out most people that could be considered an actual social equity applicant. Not to mention all of the larger companies like just propping up black figureheads and writing into the deals diminishing clauses to bring their ownership down to zero and take them out the game. So that's the first thing I've learned is that this shit is a lie.
Yep.
And
Nothing but hurdles.
But shout out to my boy Rich Wallace. He has an organization called EAT, Equity and Transformation, because there's some good people that are committed to seeing this thing be what it was presented as. You know what I'm saying? And this brother, he's working on seeing cannabis tax revenue from the state be used as actual reparations, like cash reparations. And he's got cash reparations projects that have already been going on the West Side that he's, trying to implement into the state. Because even the money that has been supposedly used for reinvestment into the community through the R3 program, it's just been a lot of question marks, you know what I mean? Like the people that are really getting busy in the community, so many of them say that there's far too many stipulations and that the money's not going where it needs to be going. And then we're learning that the money's being administered by billionaire families down in the Capitol. And, at the end of the day, we don't need billionaires to tell us how to fix our community. Billionaires are the reason our communities are decimated in the first place. And so, yeah, we're working on those things, and those are probably the first things I've learned.
I mean, I think that brings up a great point. There's a lot of money in the room today. At a place like this, what would you say are the things that guys like this can do to actively help the community and not just kind of passively take advantage of it?
Empower people of the community to help the community using your resources. Even our partners, they were smart because they came and found me. They know that I've been dedicating myself to things in the community for many years, and they collaborated with me, you know what I mean? And they didn't, try to strong arm me or bogart me, you know what I mean? I'm not going, but that's what happens in this game, in this industry. And what people will realize is when you take that step to actually empower people that are tried, true, and trusted in the community to work with you, to use your resources to empower that community, to improve that community, to invest into that community. At the end of the day, it's going to benefit you, you know what I'm saying? Because you're gonna be the first. You're gonna be ahead of the curve. And the thing about Chicago is people only see the symptoms of the exploitation that has existed in Chicago for so many decades and so many generations. And people only see the symptoms that are, the extreme violence and food deserts and lack of access and opportunity. And Chicago is often used as this scapegoat of black male criminality. You know what I mean? There's Trump on the news. Well, what about Chicago? It's always look at Chicago when you want to speak about violence. But at the end of the day, the things that they've used to supposedly impact and reduce violence, the policing and the incarceration, these things statistically, scientifically increase violence. The things that reduce violence are access to housing, access to education, access to nutrition. Those are the things that on paper show you that violence plummets. When you take communities of equivalent unemployment across a racial line, from here to Appalachia, you find the same or very similar rates of violence. So I think that these companies and these resources in the room need to be saying, okay, if we're operating in Chicago and we're operating in the cannabis space, which is a plant that has been used to incarcerate millions of these people, how do I use my resources to make a massive spike in employment? You know what I mean? How do I use my resources to increase access to education. How do I use my resources to increase access to housing? And those are the ways that we impact Chicago. And I think that if you're operating in Chicago and you're not thinking about that, then you're a complete leech. You know what I mean? And you need to check yourself. You know what I'm saying? Because
that's a super powerful point. I think that, and I don't want to say it in like the term of list of demands, but like a list of requirements for operating in a certain territory are not uncommon to begin with. So why wouldn't we apply them to things like social needs as opposed to just, you know, okay, this weed is from Illinois as opposed to Michigan, you can't take that weed there.
Like I said, if you operating in Chicago, this needs to be on your to-do list. You know what I mean? You need to look at yourself and think about your company and what are you doing to empower the city of Chicago. And I don't just mean downtown Chicago. I don't just mean North Side Chicago, West Loop Chicago. I mean the South and West sides of Chicago. You know what I mean? Like, this needs to be a priority for every cannabis company operating in Chicago. That's the only responsible way to do it. You know what I mean?
All right, I think we are over time now. But
like, stop telling us what to do, man. Get off the stage.
Thank you all for being here. I appreciate you, and thank you, Vic, for taking the time to do this, man.
No doubt. Thank you for having me.
John
Everyone check out 93 Boyz.
Cappetta, Big Mensa, High Times, 93 Boyz. Keep it going. 93 till infinity. Yes, indeed.